Disney worlds in Kingdom Hearts have two main priorities. Priority number one is incredibly simple: to give the player the experience of playing through the movie the world is based on. This philosophy extends to worlds that aren't just shot-for-shot remakes of their respective films, it's just a little harder to spot. Monstropolis has an original story, but it's one that facilitates you running through the factory with Mike, Sully, and Boo, just like the movie. San Francisco has you teaming up with Big Hero 6 on a superhero adventure that deals with Hero's trauma over losing Tadashi, just like the movie. Toy Box is a shrunken-down playground exploring Woody and Buzz's conflicting ideals and highlighting their bond of friendship, pretty much just like the movie. That one's the stretchiest example for sure, but you get the point. Any Disney world in Kingdom Hearts is written with its first priority being gamifying the movie. Kinda sounds painfully obvious when said out loud. Priority number two is inserting whatever main Kingdom Hearts character is exploring the world, usually Sora, into that narrative. Sometimes this is very poorly done, and Sora just feels like a bystander to whatever's happening around him. But more often than not, there is a clear effort to make Sora's presence felt, even if almost nothing of consequence to the overarching story tends to happen. He's at least guaranteed to participate in any major combat encounters, he'll almost certainly get to become friends with the main cast, and whether it be through exploration, minigames, or just a cutscene, he'll be a part of all the most memorable movie moments. But every now and then, the writers get particularly bold. Rather than Sora just being a part of the cast for these big movie scenes, he will completely usurp another character and take over that role in the world's story. This is a very rare occurrence. By my count, it only happens 8 times across 40 plus worlds, but I think each example is such a fascinating look at the writing choices behind these games. So, I want to talk about them, and that's what this video is. But before we get into it, some people might see when Kingdom Hearts replaces Disney characters and think of several instances that I don't really think qualify. So let's first go through some examples of what I'm not talking about to better explain what I am talking about. First, I don't mean any instance where Sora does something from the movie. In KH1 Wonderland, Sora falls through the rabbit hole, chases the white rabbit, and does the shrinking and growing routine with the doorknob. These are all recreations of Alice in Wonderland scenes where Alice did all these things. So isn't Sora replacing Alice in these scenes? Well, yes, but actually no. Alice exists in Kingdom Hearts. She's one room away. So Sora doesn't replace Alice in this world, he's just also doing things Alice did. There are dozens of examples of this across the series. It's an incredibly common thing for Sora to participate in or outright recreate a movie scene, usually alongside the main character. This is the writers basically having their cake and eating it too. The player and Sora get to directly reenact a movie moment, and then also get to hang out with the movie character in question. This is not that interesting to me. It's the obvious best of both worlds scenario that every world does. I want to talk about instances where Sora replaces a character, and thus in order to qualify, the character he's replacing cannot also appear in the world. What's interesting to discuss here is the conscious choice to remove a movie character in favor of Sora taking on their role. If the movie character appears, it doesn't count. I also don't mean any instance where a movie character is missing from a world. KH1 Deep Jungle completely excludes Tantor, but that doesn't mean Sora replaced Tantor. Sora doesn't do anything that Tantor did. He doesn't trash the camp, he doesn't cosplay to distract Kerchak, and he doesn't free Tarzan from Clayton's ship. Hell, he doesn't even do the bare minimum of being comic relief alongside Turk. Just because Sora is present in a world that's missing movie characters doesn't mean he replaced them. It just means the writers didn't want to use that missing character for whatever reason. A list of all the characters Kingdom Hearts didn't care to include could be its whole own video. In order to qualify for this conversation, Sora needs to effectively take on their role in the story for at least one scene. So those are the two solid prerequisites. A Disney character has to be absent, and Sora, or any KH character for that matter, needs to clearly take their place. That's why we get as few as 8 examples. Though that number is a bit of a lie since it's only covering the main 5 KH games. 1, 2, Birth by Sleep, Dream Drop Distance, and 3. For the video's sake, I've chosen to exclude Dark Road because it actually has a lot of these. Dark Road consciously excludes a lot of the main Disney characters because its worlds are meant to be in a state of slowly forming properly. So the Dark Road cast often ends up doing what the missing world protagonist would do. Alice is missing, so your party does the Tweedle routine and challenges the Queen of Hearts. Aladdin is missing, so Jafar tricks your party into going and retrieving the lamp from the Cave of Wonders. I think there are a lot of interesting things you could say about these examples, but including all of them would make this video mostly about Dark Road, and that's kinda lame. As for Days, Calm, and the like, I really just have no interest in combing through those repeat worlds when I have no real memory of any replacements that weren't already established in the big games. Though I will give an honorable mention to Coded's Agrabah as the only instance where Sora, or Data Sora in this case, actually uses the genie lamp himself to make some wishes. That's kind of a big deal in this convo. It technically still doesn't count since Aladdin's still in the world, but the player character is stealing a massive plot point from him. This is the perfect little choice for a side game like Coded to make, since it has absolutely no repercussions. We see Data Sora's kind-hearted nature and determination to do right by others manifest as he uses 2 of his wishes to help this world, and just gives up the 3rd wish to Aladdin. It's a cute idea that helps involve Data Sora, and by extension the player, more directly with the story of Aladdin and what's fun about it. But with that honorable mention out of the way, we can finally get to what we're actually here to talk about. The 8 instances in the main KH games where a Disney character is completely 100% replaced by a Kingdom Hearts character. We're gonna go in reverse chronological order here and start with KH3 Caribbean. Also, I lied to you, this isn't one of the 8 main examples yet. First we have this weird edge case. Remember that scene where Jack's breath is so bad it sends Luxord flying off the ship? Yeah, that's not a KH original bit. That comes from Pirates 3. Only it's obviously not Luxord getting his nasal passages violated in the movie. I had an inkling that this was the case going into this project, but I don't exactly like Pirates 3 and didn't remember the details. So, like an idiot, I scrubbed through the entire ending sequence on the Flying Dutchman looking for this moment, and I couldn't find it. But I knew this bit had to be in the movie somewhere, so I kept scrubbing around randomly at any scene with the Dutchman to no avail. At some point, I got so annoyed that I just decided to sit down and rewatch the whole movie to make sure I wasn't going crazy and remembering a scene that didn't exist. Lo and behold, about halfway through this 3-hour movie that I don't like, it finally happened. In this weird, quiet scene aboard the Black Pearl, Jack catches Will Turner leaving a trail for Beckett and does his bad breath attack to send him overboard. So after all of that, this example doesn't actually qualify because Will Turner is present and accounted for in KH3 Caribbean. Not only that, but the setting, tone, and stakes are completely different. These 2 scenes might as well be totally unrelated aside from Jack happening to use the same attack. This is in no way a real character replacement, but rather just a cute nod to a bit from the movie that otherwise wouldn't have made the cut. And that's fine. I'd even say it's a really fun choice. I'm just mad I went through that effort to find this stupid scene only for it to not really matter for this video. I suppose I still managed to write a segment about it, so all's well that ends well. Anyway, the real reason we're stopping down at the Caribbean is to talk about the scene right after this one. During the final confrontation with Davy Jones, Sora replaces Bootstrap Bill, Will's father. In the movie, when Davy Jones stabs Will, it's Bill who comes in and tackles the squid monster to avenge his son. So, if you ever thought it was weird that Sora suddenly gets pissed and decides to use fisticuffs against an enemy, now you know why. Obviously, Sora only replaces Bill in the context of this one scene, but Bootstrap doesn't appear anywhere else, so it totally counts. I think this replacement is bad in a way that speaks to how this whole world story is bad. Look, I would hate to be tasked with simplifying the story of Pirates 3, one of the most needlessly convoluted stories I've ever seen. It makes a lot of sense that they'd want to narrow down the cast to just the characters that were already established in KH2, plus only the most necessary additions. And Mr. Gibbs, my goat. Bootstrap Bill is not a part of Jack's crew, and only makes small appearances in Dutchman scenes, of which there are very few in KH3. So yes, it makes perfect sense to cut the character for the Kingdom Hearts adaptation of Pirates 3. Unfortunately, there's a little movie called Pirates 2 that they decided to skip. In that movie, which I love, Bootstrap Bill is the most consistent emotional through line the audience has. He is trapped in eternal servitude aboard the Dutchman, and Will, his son, is desperate to save him from that fate. It's Will's entire motivation in both of these movies. It's why Will killing Davy Jones at the end is such an important moment, the ultimate sacrifice he makes to free his father. This is also a big moment for Bill himself, whose mind had been failing him throughout the movie. Seeing his son nearly die snaps him back to reality and is the push he needs to fight back against Jones. So when you just remove that character from the story, you have an incoherent mess. The Caribbean story was already an incoherent mess long before this scene, but this really punctuates it. Any shred of emotional satisfaction is ripped away. It's just about Will and Elizabeth's love story now, which is fine, but really calls into question why they even bothered going on this big pirate adventure in the first place. So that's what cutting Bootstrap Bill does to this scene. But as with all these replacements, we also have to think about what Sora adds to it. Nothing, really. I mean, it makes sense that he'd get angry about a friend of his being stabbed, but it's not like him and Will are particularly close. Sora's usually more concerned with what's going on with Jack. And of course, the big problem with Sora in KH3 Caribbean is that he's separated from the rest of the cast for most of the world. So while logically it makes sense for him to react this way, we don't really emotionally connect to the moment. And then it just gets silly when he jumps on Davy Jones and starts punching him. Like, dude, what are you doing? You have a weapon. Donald and Goofy grabbing his legs is even sadder. This is really your best plan, guys? They try to at least build up to them doing this a little bit by having Sora give this speech about love right before, which has no movie analog whatsoever. But it's really not enough. The writers clearly wanted to adapt this climactic scene from the movie, and they needed someone to distract Davy Jones while Jack helped Will stab the heart. And since they didn't want to write in Bootstrap Bill, they just had Sora do it. A purely practical choice that rips out an emotionally resonant character who really completes this story in exchange for nothing. And the worst part is, I have no clue how to go about fixing it. I'd start with pretty much a full rewrite of the Caribbean story, but if we're limited to pulling from Pirates 3, it's not like there's enough time to suddenly make the player care about Bootstrap Bill enough to warrant including him. So what we got might honestly be our best case scenario. Hell, looking at the big picture, it's honestly the least of our worries. I don't think there's a single aspect of the Pirates 3 plot that a player could reasonably grasp from watching these cutscenes. I love KH3 and I love exploring the Caribbean, but they really botched the story here. So that's our textbook bad example of Kingdom Hearts replacing Disney characters. Now let's talk about a good example. In the Kingdom of Corona, Marluxia replaces the Stabbington brothers. You know, those two thugs that Flynn Rider betrayed at the start of the movie. Throughout the film, they pretty much just exist as minor antagonists to emphasize how the world is out to get Flynn. But towards the end, Mother Gothel recruits them for one last manipulation. When Rapunzel watches Flynn sail away with the crown, it's the Stabbington brothers who attack her before Mother Gothel stops them, thus convincing Rapunzel to return home. In KH3, Marluxia and a couple of Reapers take on that role. What a cute little idea. Marluxia's whole reason for being in this world is to make sure Rapunzel stays protected should the organization need her. So letting him work with Mother Gothel is a great way to make him feel more intertwined with the world's narrative. It does create a pretty different dynamic than what Gothel has with the Stabbingtons. Here Marluxia is the more active manipulator, and it maybe takes some of the threat and presence away from Gothel as a villain, but I'd say it's overall worth the sacrifice. And of course, losing the Stabbingtons is not a big deal at all. Their only other major scene is the opening where Flynn betrays them, so they're really just a prop to showcase how much of a selfish jerk Flynn is. So I guess KH3 kinda misses out on those establishing character beats for Flynn. Except it totally doesn't because they added this new scene where he leaves Sora, Donald, and Goofy behind. Way to get the whole idea of Flynn's character across through an interaction with the player character. So yeah, the Stabbingtons are small enough villains where replacing them with a KH villain just makes the KH adaptation work better. Pretty cut and dry great example of how this can be done very well. So we got the good example and the bad example. But what if I told you there's a third category that transcends good or bad? A replacement so obvious that I can't even effectively compliment it. It's just such a no-brainer that it'd be stupid not to do. I am of course talking about Sora replacing Linguini from Ratatouille. Honestly, I doubt any player even registers the idea that a replacement is happening here. If Ratatouille was ever getting into Kingdom Hearts, of course that would mean Remy was gonna be pulling Sora's hair. It's just the most obvious fun way to implement this property. In fact, if Sora wasn't the guy Remy was cooking with, I honestly think there'd be no point in having him in the game. Maybe I'd think differently if there was a full Ratatouille world and Sora was transformed into a rat or something, but this is obviously way better. And look, I like my boy Alfredo Linguini. Yes, that's his full name. He's French, by the way. He's a fun character, but we all know the heart and soul of this movie is Little Chef. All the cutscenes surrounding the bistro are emphasizing this incredible talent from the unlikeliest of places, and that's the whole theme of the movie. Anyone can cook. You really don't need Linguini around to get that point across. Plus, Sora makes for a fine replacement since I don't believe this boy has ever prepared himself a single meal. I think we all know Riku and Kairi would have been cooking those fish and mushrooms on the raft. So Sora's just as pathetic of a cook as Linguini. It all works out. That covers all our Cage 3 examples. Next on the docket is BBS. Yeah, DDD doesn't really have any, but don't worry, Dream Drop will get its time later. For now, let's talk about Castle of Dreams, where Ven replaces Gus Gus. This whole opening scene of the world is pretty much word for word ripped from the movie, just with Ven caught in the trap instead. Then for the rest of the world, Ven acts as Jack's wingman just as Gus Gus would. I don't know why I instinctively want to pronounce it Jock. Everyone in the world and movie seems to pronounce it Jack. Just a weird little disconnect, I guess. Anyway, I think this replacement is kinda lame. Once the novelty of Ven being shrunken down wears off, there's this distinct sense that the vibes are just off. And I think it's because Gus Gus is missing. In the movie's mice segments, Jack is sort of positioned as the main heroic type. He's the one getting the job done. Gus Gus is the goofy one who bites off more than he can chew. So Jack is often scrambling to recover from Gus's screw-ups. It's a classic comedic duo, the straight man and the funny man. Obviously, Jack has funny moments on his own, particularly when he and Lucifer do their whole Tom and Jerry routine, but that's the idea behind the dynamic. So when you replace Gus Gus with Ventus, you get a comedic duo with two straight men, also known as two guys who aren't funny. It reduces Jack to exposition dumper speaking in a nonsense language. A rough combo. Not to mention that Jack and Gus Gus are pretty much always seen together in Cinderella media. Hell, they have a conjoined Disney wiki page that basically means they're married. So it's just bizarre to see Jack on his own like this, and Ven is no real replacement. I don't think the problems here really begin or end with Gus's exclusion, but it's certainly a major part. The general lack of a mouse ensemble makes the house a lot lonelier than it should be. Cinderella goes from a kind soul caring for many little critters to a girl with one pet mouse. It also leaves Jack as the one who has to come up with the idea to finish the dress, instead of it being a grander group effort to help Cinderella. The whole narrative just plays out a bit awkwardly. So I wonder, why not just also have Gus Gus there? You don't need to change the opening, you can still have Ven play out the scene in the cage. Just let him also meet Gus Gus. Obviously, one mouse is not a stand-in for an entire ensemble, but two certainly makes a room feel fuller than one. And then you can actually let the comedic dynamic play out properly. I wonder if maybe they were explicitly trying to avoid making Ven's Castle of Dreams a comedic slapstick fest. But if so, then I think they were really missing the point of the mice segments in Cinderella. They are the levity from Cinderella's horrible situation. It's gotta be fun. I say all this knowing full well that the actual level design is super charming, and the Lucifer boss fight definitely captures that slapstick chaos, and those are both definitely more important than the cutscenes in between. But there's really no reason we couldn't have also made the scenes more fun. I do like Ven taking on the role of one of Cinderella's mice. It's a cute way to fold him into the group, but it really shouldn't have meant Gus's exclusion. Not to worry though, the other BBS example is so much cooler. In Dwarf Woodlands, Terra replaces the Huntsman. This is so perfect. First of all, the Huntsman in the movie is sort of a nothing character. He's tasked with killing Snow White, but can't bring himself to do it, so he instead warns Snow White of the Queen's jealousy and disappears from the rest of the movie. It's a plot point designed to get Snow White running off into the woods so the rest of the movie can happen. But oh, slotting Terra into that role works wonders. Terra's hyper-fixated on answers about Xehanort, so of course he's interested in the clairvoyance of the magic mirror. So when the evil queen tasks him with taking Snow White's heart, he plays along. BBS loves to drop Terra in front of the Disney villains, and he usually ends up doing at least a thing or two for them. So playing into that by giving him the Huntsman's job is such genius. And since the Queen wants Snow White's heart as proof, there's this little miscommunication where Terra thinks she means the metaphysical heart that Kingdom Hearts tends to talk about a lot. He was very recently tricked into taking a princess's heart, so when he takes that box, he's genuinely worried he might fall for that trap again. So he gets a little character moment here where he steels himself and swears that won't happen again. What a perfect way to take this innocuous element from the movie and use it to say something about the player character. A bunch of perfect decisions stacked on top of each other to make this world feel so much more consequential than it otherwise would. Terra then goes on to meet Snow White, and of course he's not even gonna attempt to kill her. I do kinda wish he did what the Huntsman does in the movie, that being warning her about the Queen. It would have been a nice solid moment of him showcasing his resolve and choosing to protect the light, but perhaps it's a bit too early in Birth by Sleep's story for such a definitive moment. Instead, Terra gets bailed out by a bunch of Unversed scaring Snow White off. That's where the Huntsman parallels end, But I do also love the next scene where, now that Terra has met the sweet and innocent Snow White, he has all the information he needs to tell off the Queen and basically get his meeting with the mirror by force. The huntsman in the movie is far too cowardly to be this much of a badass. He just gives the Queen a pig heart as a trick. So Terra showing back up purposely empty-handed and calling the Queen a jealous witch is just really satisfying. He's effectively surpassing his movie counterpart here and doing what he probably should have done. This is absolutely the gold standard for Cage characters taking on these Disney roles. Terra fits in seamlessly over a character no one would miss. The movie events reveal a bit about Terra's character that contributes to the game's overarching plot, and by the end, his breaking away from those movie events makes for a more satisfying conclusion. It doesn't get much better than this. But let's see if Cage 2 can manage it. First off, we have a pretty prominent honorable mention here, with Xaldin acting as the primary villain of Beast Castle as opposed to Gaston. I don't really consider this a replacement since the story of Beast Castle heavily diverges from Beauty and the Beast, with the only event shared between the two being the ballroom dance. All of Xaldin's plans and actions are completely different from Gaston's, and it's easy to imagine that Gaston does still exist in this adaptation, he's just off-screen. It'd be like saying Vanitas replaced Waternoose in Monstropolis, or young Xehanort replaced Zurg in Toy Box. As I said up top, just because a character is absent doesn't mean they were replaced. Xaldin definitely has a better argument than those other examples, but even so, he's more easily compared to Forte from the straight-to-DVD sequel than Gaston. Still though, it's a pretty major shakeup for the main villain of a movie to be completely absent in favor of a Cage original, so it's hard to just breeze past Cage 2 without at least acknowledging Xaldin. So, there. He has been acknowledged. Moving on. As far as I can tell, there's only one real replacement case in this game, and it's in the very last Disney World. In Space Paranoids, Sora replaces Kevin Flynn. Tron is a movie where Kevin Flynn gets sucked into the virtual world and is the clueless user on an adventure with Tron to defeat the MCP. In many ways, it's easy to see Kevin as simply an audience surrogate. The person not in the know, so all the other characters have someone to explain the world to. On top of that, Space Paranoids is a video game in-universe, so it's very much giving player character energy. So, naturally, when adapting the movie for Cage 2, it only makes sense to take that player character and make them the player character. I could have worded that better. Sora being a user from outside the computer world naturally fills Kevin Flynn's niche. Now, obviously, the Space Paranoid story isn't a one-to-one match with the movie. It's completely recontextualized here as the program within Ansem's computer. But as I said up top, even when there's an original story for these worlds, their first priority is still giving the player that experience of playing through the movie. Space Paranoids is still all about adventuring through the computer world, and along the way it recreates all the most memorable set pieces from the movie. The light cycle, breaking through the wall of the game grid, getting an upgrade at the I.O. tower, the solar sailor, hell, the Sark and MCP fight is frighteningly faithful. Other Disney worlds wish they had this kind of accuracy. Suffice to say, even though the world's grander context is heavily Kingdom Heartsified, the core of the experience matches the movie perfectly. So when I say Sora replaces Kevin Flynn, I do mean it just as much as our previous examples. There may not be as clean of a side-by-side movie comparison, but all the other key ingredients are present. But that's enough justifying this example's inclusion. Let's actually talk about if it's good or not. Yeah, I like it. As I said earlier, while Kevin Flynn is technically the protagonist of Tron, he feels like an audience surrogate and is thus by far the most forgettable part of the movie. I couldn't even tell you what his character arc is, though I suppose that might just be because Tron isn't really well known for its terribly compelling narrative. Anyway, the point is, removing Kevin and letting Sora take the reins loses nothing and adds everything. Cage 2 pretty much invents a character arc for Tron, as Sora encourages him to be less rigid and more easygoing. It's like the one time I could say Kingdom Hearts actively improves on a movie. I'd certainly watch these Cage 2 cutscenes again over the film any day. But even though the game heavily rewrites the Tron lore to fit with the Hollow Bastion story, they still maintain the core of Tron's character, his loyalty to the users. The users in this context just happen to be Sora, Donald, and Goofy. It all fits remarkably well. At least, it used to. Unfortunately, this is where Dream Drop rears its ugly head. In the grid, Kevin Flynn exists. He's here now, and according to him, the events of the Tron movie totally happened. I think this is the only instance where a future game introduces a previously replaced character. So there's this kind of awkward tension as Sora and Kevin talk about Tron, and they are both in the position of having gone on the big 80s computer adventure with him. It's two people who have a common friend fighting over which of them that friend likes more. They don't let this linger. In fact, this is the only scene Sora and Kevin are in together, but it does make me wonder if we could have had something more here. There's no way that back during Cage 2's development they could have predicted how important Kevin Flynn would become in Tron Legacy, so it's not like they could have prepared for this. But I wonder if they could go back, maybe they would want to include Kevin in Cage 2. That way Sora could have a rapport with him going into the grid, and finding out he has a son now and that they could all work together to save Tron could have been really exciting. As is, Sora's visit gets rid of the Flynns very quickly so he could focus on Tron, since that's the only thing Sora cares about in this world. I do love what they do with the Rinsler stuff here. Frankly, it's explored better here than in the movie, but I can't help but imagine what could have been. Ultimately, I still think Cage 2 made the right call replacing Kevin, future games be damned, but it's really interesting to think about how movie sequels might completely uproot the direction these Cage worlds were going in. I mean, what if Port Royal had decided to use an original villain instead of Barbossa? Or to forego using Will or Elizabeth in favor of focusing on Jack? How would that have changed the Caribbean story? What happens if Toy Story 5 or Frozen 3 contradict things from Toy Box or Arendelle? It's always fun to see how they'll ride around sticky situations like that. But now that finally brings us to Cage 1, and I once again want to start with honorable mentions. Two this time, but they're very similar. Atlantica and Halloween Town are both worlds that follow the basic structure of their movie, but shift a couple details in the interest of both tying the stories closer to the overarching Kingdom Hearts narrative, and conveniently getting around including certain major areas from the films. In Atlantica, Ariel's desire to explore the surface is generalized as a desire to see other worlds. In Halloween Town, Jack's obsession with Christmas is replaced by a fascination with the Heartless. Both of these stay completely in line with their characterizations from their movies, while sidestepping the need to design the surface in Atlantica or Christmas Town, both locations that would go on to appear in Cage 2 where both worlds follow their movie plots more directly. So there's a bit of a chicken and egg situation here. What came first, the plots of the world or the level design decision? There's almost certainly not a clear answer to that question, but it's fun to think about. Anyway, for our purposes, these are technically replacements if you squint. The most striking one is definitely the Crystal Trident in Atlantica standing in for the Eric statue from the movie. The scene in KH is obviously meant to echo the scene in the movie where Trident destroys Ariel's treasure trove, and both act as the incident that leads Ariel to seeking out Ursula. Halloween Town doesn't get as nice a parallel, but the scene where Sally tries to tell Jack she's got a bad feeling about this whole thing is very reminiscent of moments in the movie, specifically any scene where Jack's talking to her about the Santa suit. He talks right past her as she tries to warn him. Oh, and I suppose Jack does conduct experiments on his obsession in both. So in a way, these are direct replacements, just not of characters, but rather objects or ideas. That puts them comfortably in the honorable mention camp, but I just wanted to point them out because I like these two examples a lot. This is Kingdom Hearts writing at its finest, weaving KH elements into the narrative of these worlds in such a natural way that helps them feel involved in the grander story, while maintaining that sense of playing through the movie. I may even prefer this to a completely original story for a world. Even if these decisions very well may have been made purely to simplify the levels, I think they're great. But let's get back to the main attraction. There are two actual examples of Disney character replacement in KH1, and one of them is a Little Chef-style no-brainer. Sora replaces Arthur in regards to his interactions with Merlin. Okay, this one might feel like a stretch, but I stand by it. The Sword in the Stone is all about a young King Arthur being educated by the sorcerer Merlin, and in KH1, Merlin takes it upon himself to do the same for Sora. Honestly, this probably speaks more to the general evolution of Merlin as part of Disney's grander pantheon of characters than it does to any sort of significant writing decision by the KH team. Merlin has wildly outgrown his movie. Anytime a Disney project needs some kind of guide or instructor character, Merlin's probably the first in line, especially if there's some kind of magic theme. I remember him so distinctly from the Sorcerers of the Magic Kingdom game in the parks, and I know he's the initial guide character for Disney Dreamlight Valley. People who have never seen The Sword in the Stone can probably recognize this guy. He's hit that kind of Disney icon status. So including him in KH1 almost feels like a given. It's a big Disney crossover project. Merlin's gotta be there to guide the player in some way. How convenient that magic is a mechanic. All that said, there is definitely a lot of love poured into his appearance. The whole scene of him pulling his furniture out of that small bag is an inverse of a movie scene. But perhaps this is less Sora replacing Arthur, and more so just another of the many times where Merlin gets to tutor someone. Still, can't say it doesn't count as a replacement. It meets all the requirements. It's just such a no-brainer, it's not even worth thinking about that much. So that just leaves the last big example, the one everyone probably immediately thinks of. In all likeliness, I referenced this example in the thumbnail, and used it in the blurb to explain my March Caprice submission. Oh yeah, happy March Caprice! Almost forgot that's what I'm making this for. This year's theme is homecoming, so I think it's fair that we end this little journey by coming home to the good old 100-Acre Wood, where Sora replaces Christopher Robin. This is a rare case where a decision made at the infancy of the series has had pretty major ramifications on future titles. It's like the Kevin Flynn situation, but way more pronounced. Let's start with talking about Christopher. He's quite the anomaly of a character. He is simultaneously the least memorable part of his cast and the person the entire world centers around. Every Winnie the Pooh character is one of Christopher Robin's toys. The 100-Acre Wood is his play place. The opening song leads with that information. And yet, there are so many Winnie the Pooh projects that don't include him. He is sort of superfluous in that way. The core cast of Pooh, Piglet, Rabbit, Eeyore, Tigger, and Roo are all fully capable of carrying stories without him. In that way, Kingdom Hearts not using him seems to make perfect sense. There's a young child character who no one cares that much about and only makes brief appearances. Well, let's just pluck that guy out and put in our young child character instead. What could go wrong? Well, the thing is, Christopher Robin may be absent in a lot of Pooh projects, but when he's present, he's the emotional core of the story. When we watch Pooh try to get honey, Tigger bounce through Rabbit's garden, and Eeyore's house get destroyed, it's all charming fun. But when Pooh and Christopher talk on that bridge about not forgetting each other, the whole experience takes on a new meaning. It becomes about not forgetting those you care about most as your life progresses into the great unknown, about growing up but never fully letting go of that child in you. Christopher Robin, despite being like 6, is the most adult person in this world. He's aware of the troubling realities to come, but indulges in this fantasy a little longer. When he's not around, a Pooh project is just that fantasy with no juxtaposition, and there are still great stories there, but it is a big choice to adapt this property without him. So I'll be blunt, I think KH1 kinda flops in this regard. Sora just does not fill this role properly. He does all the things you remember Christopher doing in the shorts, having benign conversations with Pooh, helping him with the balloon, freeing him from Rabbit's house, even unceremoniously leaving the world behind. But it doesn't carry the same weight. To the extended Pooh cast, this is a new friend, and that changes the texture of all these moments pretty substantially. Like, they all appreciate Sora helping out, but there's no familiarity or sense of dependence. It doesn't help that this world is mostly quiet with only Pooh, Piglet, and Tigger getting their voices. It feels like they made the decision to sub out Christopher for Sora with the mindset that Christopher is not a popular or important enough member of the cast to include. Which again, isn't wrong, many Pooh projects have done it, but the absence feels much more obvious when Sora is taking his place. It's just not the same. In KH1. But oh, the way this choice ripples into KH2 and 3. If KH1 only understood Winnie the Pooh's surface level appeal, KH2 and 3 seem to really grasp that extra layer of depth that comes from a character like Christopher Robin. It helps that KH2 seems to take a lot of inspiration from the straight-to-DVD sequel, The Search for Christopher Robin. You know, between this, Zaldin as Forte, and Agrabah taking cues from Return of Jafar, this game seems to really love the straight-to-DVD stuff. The most obvious similarity is the inclusion of the spooky cave from the movie, but this ending conversation Sora and Pooh have is very reminiscent of the Christopher scenes from that movie. Now that Sora has left and returned, this world gets the chance to elicit that sense of familiarity and dependence that's needed in order to match Pooh's relationship with Christopher. Where Christopher has to struggle with leaving Pooh behind for school, Sora needs to move on to other worlds, and in both instances, Pooh struggles with the idea of his best friend not being there. So Sora comforts him by assuring he'll always be with him, even when they're apart. It's crazy how KH1 doesn't even attempt something like this, maybe because they knew it'd fall flat. But after hanging out with this bear for 2 games, it really works. I think it also helps that Sora's so invested in getting Pooh's memories of him back all throughout the world. Sora wants to cling to this innocent little relationship he's formed. It may not always seem like it, but it's just as important for Sora to know that Pooh's always with him. And then they go and expand on this idea even further in KH3. I'm not gonna act like I wasn't overall disappointed by how they handled this world, but they really tried something here with these last cutscenes. They reaffirmed their statement from KH2, but it feels different this time. Pooh didn't forget Sora because some torn pages got ripped out. He genuinely felt he was drifting away, and Sora felt it too. It feels like there's this undertone that Sora's growing up, a concept the 100-Acre Wood denizens can't understand. How often can Sora realistically return to the innocence of this place after all he's been through? How can he continue to promise Pooh that he'll be back when his adventures keep sending him further and further away? It's taking the germ of that Christopher Robin idea, the inevitability of growing up, and expanding on it in a way most Pooh projects can't because Christopher Robin always stays a kid. Well, except that one time. The live-action Christopher Robin movie came out in 2018, so I doubt it had any influence on KH3's writing, but it makes perfect sense that two different creative teams came to this same story conclusion. I think it speaks to how well they developed Sora and Pooh's relationship that it accidentally ended up in a similar place as Pooh's relationship with Christopher. Sora may have started out as a poor stand-in, but with KH2 he grew into a proper Christopher parallel. And now with KH3 we get the chance to use that unique relationship to explore Sora's character in such an interesting way that stretches beyond the bounds of this world. Suffice to say, this has become the very best instance of a KH character replacing a Disney character, and is a perfect example of why I find this idea so interesting. When done well, it makes these Disney World visits feel more natural, and can even elevate the overarching story by exploring the main characters in new and prominent ways. When done poorly, it's still really interesting to talk about. Thanks for watching! If you're here when this premieres, happy March Caprice! By the end, this whole thing felt surprisingly on theme, which was lucky because I mostly picked this topic out of a hat. I figured it'd be relatively easy to get done on time after I had just worked on a behemoth of a Keyblade ranking video. Like, comment, and subscribe if you want. I'm not always talking about Kingdom Hearts, but it tends to come up often. See you later.